Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of experts. And joining me today is John Reynolds, CEO and founder of Titan Property Developers. Well, welcome to you, John.
Thank you.
Simon Das, property investor, finance broker and founder of 978 Group. Welcome to you, Simon.
Thanks, Stephen.
Good trip down from Morecambe?
Yes, it wasn't so bad. Only a minor delay on the train, but yeah, here safe and sound.
Has your famous resident returned home after his fight?
He has. He was in the pub the next day, watching the football, just in the local pub in the sort of quieter area of town. So yeah,
Good
character.
stuff.
straight back to his roots.
Good stuff. All right, well, we'll get on with the questioning. And John, you're going first. With the new government-backed insurance policy for EWS1 assessors in place from July, do the panel think that this will speed up what seems to be a lengthy timescale to get approval and subsequent mortgage acceptability? Now, before you answer, I'm just going to tell our viewers that an EWS form, in case you didn't know, is the form that has to be completed by surveyors when rectifications have been needed post the Grenfell disaster. So improvements made to the building, you then get the form done. The difficulty is that, as with a lot of these things, it's never run smoothly. For instance, if you've got a big development and you've got a lot of rectification work, all of that rectification work has to be done before the form is signed, or at least I think that's the case, if I'm right, John.
It's an absolute minefield.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's external wall system. So it's everything to do with cladding, everything to do with the outside of the building. And as you rightly say, Grenfell changed everything. I think it was December 2019 that RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, brought it in. The issue and the answer to the question is that because RICS brought that in, not the government, when the government have now announced saying you don't need the EWS1 form, particularly in anything under 6 stories, RICS have turned around and said, we're not embracing that. So for anyone, whether you're a developer or trying to sell your apartment or try and buy an apartment, it's just not clear on where you stand from a lending point of view, which has created probably problems for yourself, maybe even yourself, just anyone in development. It's just not clear.
John, I mean, we live in an area here where there's a lot of high-rise buildings. 70 stories is quite the norm now. Do you think that a lot of these modifications that we're insisted on are really necessary? I mean, I'll just say, for instance, in the building I live in, there was over 600 balconies had to be changed because the flooring of the balconies was wood slats. Now, they were treated with fireproof coatings or whatever the technical expression is. And they've all had to be changed now for metal floors. I think they've used aluminium sheeting, strips. Is that really necessary?
No, I mean, I think it's not just about what they're implementing, it's about understanding how, for example, fire spreads in a building. So it's not just the combustibility and the materials themselves, but it's literally a better understanding of just how the whole thing actually operates. And no one really knows that, no time's been spent on that. I think the other thing is you build a building like where we are now here in Canary Wharf completely differently to how we build a 2 or 3 story building, which is our typical.
Of course.
And so therefore it's all signed off at building regs, it's all conforms, but it could fail on an EWS1 form because it's not being built according to the specification. So there's not really one rule for everything, which is like your balconies that can fall in the cracks.
But I suppose the other thing is it's all a bit of a waste of time if somebody then puts their washing out on a balcony, which acts as a fire trip, doesn't it?
Exactly.
If it catches fire, or somebody puts a satellite dish, which is a sort of uncontrollable electrical product on a remote balcony that nobody can get to if it catches
100%.
fire. It's difficult, isn't it? I know people say, if you complain about washing on balconies or satellite dish, you're being too fussy and it's micromanagement or macromanagement, but it's necessary, isn't it? These things happen. Do you have this a lot, Simon, when you're asked to finance things? Has this been coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. More and more in the last couple of years, but it causes extreme delays, major headaches. It's seeing people become mortgage prisoners, unable to get out of the mortgage unable to sell a property until major works have taken place, which sometimes takes buy-in from 50, 60, 100 leaseholders, you know, in some instances. And it's not something that can happen overnight. So this insurance product that the government have brought in, I don't see how that's really going to affect this, because there's still as much work to do. There's still as many surveys to do and as many surveyors. And ultimately, they're going to do exactly the same job. They're not going to want to risk their insurance just because there's an extra insurance behind it. So I think, you know, it's hot air from the government in terms of that insurance policy, and
But, you
won't
know,
have
Simon,
a meaningful impact.
John and I were talking before the show about just general poverty and that's being created at the moment by the economic circumstances. And we were saying how difficult it is, or how difficult it is to anticipate how people are going to take themselves out of this situation. Where's the exit? What's got to happen to make life easier? And I have the same fear for the property market. We're getting so many difficulties and technicalities in the financing. Developers are telling me that they're having a struggle getting their banks to release money without, you know, all sorts of ridiculous conditions and things. People are having difficulty financing just even straightforward properties they want to buy for their homes. I mean, I don't know quite where we're going. I think it's going to be quite a struggle.
Yeah, it's extremely challenging. It seems that there's more and more caution in every sector of the marketplace, and there's so many moving parts in any property transaction that it's just becoming, sometimes unworkable. It's hard to see what's going to give and when, and if things will sort of settle down.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on that happy note, Simon, we'll move on to your question. With regard to levelling up across the UK, and particularly in the north of England, do the panel think that investments like the Eden Project North are really worthwhile, and do they have a positive effect on the local housing prices?
Absolutely.
That's made for you, that question.
It is, isn't it? Absolutely. A project like the Eden Project North will have a profound impact. So, you know, when you're looking at investing in tourism from a government perspective, you could take an example like the Marble Arch Mound. They spent £5 million on this mound, this pile of mud.
You're not supposed to know about these things coming from the north of England.
In one of the wealthiest quarters on the planet. You know, you're next to Oxford Street, Mayfair. You've put £5 million into this false tourist attraction that I think they got 90,000 visitors over the course of a year, and I think they actually reimbursed them all because it was such a flop. So you spend 10 times that in Morecambe, in the north of England. That's what Eden Project North are looking for, £50 million from government, and they'll put the other 75 million or so in from their own resources. That £50 million is going to create 6,000, perhaps 6,500 jobs in the local area from the improvements in the economy, in businesses surrounding and benefiting from Eden Project North. Now that is going to create generational transformation within the local economy. 6,500 jobs is around 15 to 20% of the population of Morecambe getting a new job. You've then got 750,000 to 1 million visitors a year coming to Morecambe, spending their money. Some of them are going to see the opportunity in Morecambe. You can't argue with the views across the bay to the Lake District. Some of them may want to settle in Morecambe, start a business in Morecambe, or just visit more regularly. So that's going to have a positive economic impact. Okay. And then, you know, the figures are 2 billion into the local economy over the course of 20 years. So for that £50 million investment, I'm not sure what the actual percentage return is, but if you could put 50 million into something and get 2 billion back.
It sounds pretty healthy, doesn't it?
I think it's a no-brainer. They need more of this type of transformational project in communities that are going to benefit so drastically.
Well, two questions there, Simon. One is, I suppose, yes, you do need investment of that type, but it also has to be in something that really is going to work.
Yeah.
And we've seen around the country sometimes some things that don't work that well.
Yes.
But the more interesting question, I think, bearing in mind our earlier sort of conversations, was, is the funding for that sort of project secure when the government say, oh, well, we're going to put 50 million in or whatever it is. Is it secure, or is that subject to, or does it change? Does it change with the government? Or
Well, there's a pot of cash, the Levelling Up Fund, and projects are bidding for that money. There's currently 2 awards of £50 million in this round, and the Chancellor a couple of weeks ago confirmed that this round is going ahead as normal. So Eden are looking for one of the big pots. As far as I understand, once it's approved, that money is going into that project. They've had to go through a lengthy application process. Eden isn't an idea. It's been in progress for 6 years now. Planning, land deals agreed, you know, an incredible amount of money and a huge amount of infrastructure has gone into it already. So it is sort of shovel ready, as they say. And once this money's improved, it will be secured for that project.
Good news indeed. Great stuff. Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking John and Simon more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and I'm joined by John Reynolds and Simon Dass. John, your second question. What do the panel think the overriding sensitivities will be for developers when formulating their business plans and project programs for 2023? Well, that keeps going for a bit.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, there's so many things that have come into play now that if we were having this chat a year ago, we're not even on the table. You know, and they affect everything, not just the business plan for a developer, whether you're aspiring or someone like us that's in the trenches trying to make a business of it. You know, the war, the Ukraine, Russia, consequences on the energy bills and how that's affecting people's affordability alongside interest rates that have increased. You know, it's very, very important that as a developer, you're very much focused on what you're ultimately going to achieve in your development. So you've got to get your prices right, your location right, and make sure you know your target buyer, because there's so many things that could trip you up along the way. We've seen the increase in building and material costs. We've seen so many delays in the planning processes. I mean, it's tough to make a business plan now with so many external political and economical factors coming into play.
I mean, just as a point on that, I mean, people are fed up with me hearing this from me, but I'm very anti-government interfering too much in the property market, because I don't think they've got the professionals to do it. No, they just rely on a very narrow stream of advisors who may or may not be that good at what they pontificate on. And I just think the market is actually quite capable of finding its own levels and ways through things.
Talk of a rent cap, for example. We don't need that. It should self-police itself, you know, ultimately. And there's times when the government's got involved and overcomplicated. We talked about the EWS1 form and the mess there and so on. It's just made things slower and difficult. And as a developer, time is often money, depending on how you source your finance and how you plan ahead. And of course, if you're starting a development today, you might not be bringing it to the market for 3 years. And how many things have we lived through? And what's next? That's sort of where my brain's at. It's like, what is actually coming next? Because
I was talking to one of our contributors who runs a very, very big development company, one of the biggest in London, in fact. And I said something about, well, you know, just have to remember that a developer's project will probably take 3 years to come to fruition. And he said, are you kidding? He said, it's more like 7.
I think the other thing you've got to be really mindful of is surveyors are particularly nervous and finicky in this market. So you could be looking at doing a development, particularly if you look at the permitted development side of things and think it might be an easier route, but make sure you can get mortgages on the product you're going to produce. Start that process early, because a lot of them are actually looking to not lend. So you could produce a perfectly good product and not actually be in a position where you can sell it.
That's a fine sentiment and a good attitude, John, but I've experienced this myself. So what you do to counter that, you have your surveyors come in early to do a pre-valuation while you're still under construction so they can see what's going on. You think getting them involved is a great thing and all the rest of it. And what do? They start saying, well, How do we know you're going to finish the gardens? How do we know you're going to put the cafe in down there? How do we know you're going to do the roof? And it then starts to have a negative effect. And the trouble is with that, because everything is now put on a national database. If they down it, you're in trouble, because that's where everybody goes to.
Every other
look at the
surveyor
data.
can see it,
yeah,
and it's effectively blighted. They'll all follow suit. No, it's one of those things. And answers the question. You've just got to make sure that you're looking really deeply into where you want to develop and what you're going to produce.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck with that. Okay, Simon. Holiday lets are becoming increasingly popular in areas like the north of England, particularly in seaside areas. Another good one for you. Do the experts think that this can be advantageously exploited by current and new buy-to-let investors? Is it a new market, in other words? I think that's what they're saying.
I mean, it's not a new market, is it? It's been a market for a very long time, but it's certainly becoming more of an accessible market. We've seen probably since the rise of Airbnb, people found it much more accessible to go and rent initially a spare room and then maybe get a little flat to rent out. I think we've got to be careful using the word exploited. I think there's certainly profit to be made, and when we're looking at our portfolio, our management portfolio, there must be at least 40% of our portfolio where we think we can get an increase in net income by running them as service departments, holiday lets, and they are in Morecambe by the sea. Some of those, a lot of those, we project over 100% net increase in income from those properties. So I think it's something that people should be exploring, should be adding into their toolkit. Obviously, you want to be mindful to be diversified when you're investing in anything. So if you put a percentage of your properties into that holiday let market, I think it can be a good thing. And I think it can benefit the communities that you're doing it within as well. If you're providing quality and you're getting clients who are coming, willing to spend some money, want to return because you've offered a high standard of accommodation, then you can also benefit the community really, symbiotically. We've even been commissioning artworks and things in our local area just to add a little bit more to the local community.
Okay, just on this subject of holiday lets, we have a lot of trouble in London with that, because I think the theory is that they will go into a new development, they will do the overnight lets and things, which certainly in London and Greater London requires planning consent to do. Some areas it doesn't, but in London it does. And what happens is, because those people have got no interest in the property, the amount of wear and tear is quite high, suitcases being bumped all around the common areas and all sorts of things. And then, of course, when it's time to redecorate or refurb, the residents get the bill, not the not the letting company.
Yes.
And it's a sort of degenerative process in a way, and it's not really to be encouraged. Trouble is, a concierge or whoever has somebody turn up and says, "Can I have the keys to number 2 or whatever it is?" and they're not really allowed to grill them to any great extent about why they want the keys or whatever else. So it's very hard to control.
Yes, I think what's vitally important if you are investing in that sector is that you are working with experienced and credible management companies. I've been looking at entering this sector for as long as I've been investing in Morecambe, really, but only in the last few months have I found the right partner, and they've been managing property in this industry, in this sector, for about 5 or 6 years. They've got good track record. I can view their properties and see the upkeep. I can see the reviews and all those things that show that they're a credible company that are looking after the properties properly and not just using it as a cash cow. I think, in a seaside town, there's probably less issues around.
It's part of the culture, isn't it?
The types of things that you're speaking about, but in inner city areas, I think you either need to be self-managing with a real conscience, or you need someone who is on that moral playing with you. Otherwise, it could become exploitative.
I was just on the funny side of things. I was in a development down here not so long ago, and I was standing with the concierge, and a lady came downstairs and said, "And what time's dinner served?" so there we are. Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this show. So John Reynolds, CEO and founder of Titan Property Developments, thank you for coming in. Simon Das, property investor, finance broker and founder of 978 Group, thank you for coming down today. It's great to see you both. Great answers to the questions. I thank you, and I'm sure our viewers will thank you too. So that's all we've got time for today. So join me again next time on Property Question Time.